Wild Health is about optimizing you. We use genomics, blood work, biometrics, microbiome assessment, many other tests, and a conversation with you to come up with a full health optimization plan. What's the perfect diet, exercise, and supplement plan for you and only you? The Wild Health podcast is about optimizing all of us. Here we cover the cutting-edge science that gives you the base to be able to apply the personalized plan we give you as a patient. To sign up as a patient, go to wildhealth.com. Or if you're a physician or health coach and you want to learn how to do this for your patients, we're happy to help as well. Wildhealth.com for all the information on becoming a patient or working with us.
What's up? What's happening, everybody? Welcome back to the Wild Health Podcast. I am your host, Steve Weatherholt, one of our health coaches here at Wild Health. You guys have heard me talk here for a little bit now in a few episodes, and I am super excited here to host my next guest today, Emma Tekstra. Emma, welcome to the Wild Health Podcast.
Thank you so much.
I'm excited to have you, and I was telling you before we hit record here that it feels very meant to be that we're here together today. We're going to have you share some information about holistic health and well-being. I'm going to read kind of the formal introduction here to get the audience acclimated with you, and then we're just going to jump right in here. So for you listeners and viewers at home, Emma Tekstra is a global health consultant and a researcher focused on uncovering the foundations of health and well-being. Combining her actuarial expertise with health science, Emma's journey began over a decade ago when she successfully addressed her son's health challenges through natural methods, leading her to explore global health approaches and emphasize the impact of diet and lifestyle. A critic of profit-driven allopathic medicine, Emma champions natural health practices like functional medicine, food as medicine, herbalism, and energy medicine, aiming to educate others on reversing disease and improving longevity. Originally from the UK, she studied mathematics and computer science at the University of Nottingham and spent 25 years in actuarial and consulting roles, consistently driving innovation. Now based in Southern California, Emma's Christian faith inspires her pursuit of truth and health advocacy. She enjoys outdoor activities with her husband and 2 sons. Welcome, Emma. Thanks for being here. And hopefully my introduction did you some justice.
Good enough.
Well, Emma, I want to kind of get started here. Emma's got a book out, guys, and we're going to link that in the show notes. I got a chance to get through a majority of it. I'm making a promise here to power through and finish it. But if you guys are compelled by anything you hear on this episode, definitely check out Emma's book. We'll put links in the show notes for that. As I was reading, take me back to, I talked a little about the introduction here about what kind of sent you down this path, but start me from the beginning here. How did you go from mom and an actuarialist? I probably didn't say that right. But to use your words from time to time in the book, data nerd. How did you go from that to really diving into holistic health and well-being for people and really an advocate in the health space?
Yeah.
Take me back to the beginning.
Well, actually, I actually always was interested in medicine. I actually wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be a brain surgeon in my teen years, and my very
No
traditional
way.
father. Oh yeah, my very traditional Jewish dad taught me out of it, or sort of forbade it. So yeah, I became an actuary, which is a profession. And so, but I was still always interested in looking at medical research and all of this. So about 15 years ago, my older son at age 5 was diagnosed with Asperger's and ADHD. And the doctors, he'd been a very sickly kid, had lots of problems before that. So it kind of wasn't huge news to me. But the doctors wanted to put him on drugs, and they gave him a pretty poor prognosis, said he'd never leave home, never go to college, all of that. And by the way, this nearly 20-year-old is doing phenomenal. He's a sophomore at a major 4-year college in another state, and doing absolutely fantastically. He's studying mechanical and aerospace engineering, so he's doing amazing.
So much for staying at home, right?
Absolutely, right? So
Awesome.
but at the time, the doctors and drugs and all of this, and I'm like, doesn't sound right. And so I just went back to my roots and my actuarial background and just started researching. And really that's what did it. And I started learning about what actually drives health and how it's all connected. So how the health of the brain that might exhibit symptoms that we sort of put it in a behavioral bucket. And then we might say, oh, we've got to adjust their behavior. It's actually the health of this organ between your ears that you call your brain, right? And so it's all connected. It's connected to the health of the body and his gut and his immune system, and all of this stuff is connected. And so I changed. I was still working for the same company. I've been in the corporate world for 25 years, so I was still working for the same company, but I moved more into the healthcare space. And then last year, with COVID, everything kind of blew up, and the things I wanted to talk about, the company did not want to talk about, and so I ended up leaving the corporate world last year to write the book, really to write all this stuff down.
Awesome. And I think your message around what you said about your son, which is like, hey, the health of the system, the health of the person
Yeah.
drives a lot of the behaviors that we want or are looking to change. And that's a message I think our audience here at Wild Health, I know our patients and a lot of people that listen, like they're searching for that, right? Like this idea that it's just, whatever is between the ears that needs to work a certain way. It's like, well, the whole system working together is really what we're all searching for. And that's what drew me into even what I do now with Wild Health and why I was drawn to this company in the first place is, you know, for me, like I grew up as studying exercise science, being a personal trainer, and it was like, cool, exercise, exercise, exercise,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
And then, you start to understand like, okay, that's a piece of this, but wow, people dealing with mental health, people are dealing with nutritional deficiencies.
Yeah.
And those all things can improve and make you better at the thing I like, which is exercise.
Mm.
There's sleep, there's all these
Yeah.
things. And, now being able to look at the entire picture, I think has been a cool piece of the journey for me and for many of our patients. They're looking to just figure out one of those buckets of wellness that they're
Yeah.
missing deficiencies in and
Yeah.
what can improve that. And so like it's amazing to hear your son's doing so well and there's been major improvements. And I really want to unpack pieces of those with you today. And as I went through your book, beautifully kind of like progressive chapters of like, I feel like it starts very like foundational and simple and progressively gets a little bit more complex and things build on each other. And so
Yeah.
I kind of want to do that as we walk through this
Yeah.
today,
Yeah.
if that's cool with you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, and I love the name, the company Wild Health, because I think that some good health has been really degraded these days. I'll meet somebody and I'll talk to them and they're like, how you know? Oh, I'm doing really great, but they're on 5 medications
Hmm.
and they get out of breath when they walk down the street. And it's not even beyond just the physical and mental health. So I talk about human flourishing is
Mm.
is what I talk about, and the 4 components of that. So the physical and the mental, super important, and we can get into how they're connected. But then I also talk about social well-being or social wellness, and then the spiritual aspect. And so for me, you need all 4 of those working really well, and that creates human flourishing, or in you guys' case, wild health. So yeah, there's 4 different components.
We have a few components to our company that we focus on in terms of core values. And one of them is to live wild. And I always like that rings true to a lot of the things that I think you and I are going to go through in terms of like, we talk to our patients about these all the time is like food, live wild, eat
Yeah.
things that are more from
Yep.
nature.
Yeah, yeah.
Mental health, live wild, get outside, get sun,
Yeah,
breathe fresh air,
absolutely.
exercise, live wild, do natural human movements that we're meant
Yep.
to do. Like
Yeah.
it always is this thing that I remember. And so, I like the name too.
Yeah.
If the higher ups are listening, we love the name. Thank you. Um, Before we jump into kind of those 4 buckets of health or 4 domains of wellness, and human flourishing, can you explain to me, as naive as I am, what is an actuary? And how do you feel like, because I feel like, I know sort of what it is. My explanation's probably not great, but
Yeah.
like, talk me through like, you became an actuary, and what is that?
Yeah.
And how do you think that sort of like goes along with your health journey?
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So, I mean, it is a profession. There's a lot of exams to take, but it's basically about assessing risk. So we're very good with data. And so I've been told I'm not a typical actuary. I'm not as nerdy as I pretend I am, but I'm not. I'm super wild. I do crazy things. I've had a very rebellious past. But I really love data and analyzing lots of different kinds of data. And I think how it's helped me in my journey is bringing it all together. Because if they just, I've been writing for a newspaper the last year, and if you just look at some newspaper headlines, and even on the food, if you just look at the food, well, eggs are really good for you. Oh no, eggs are bad for you. No, they're gonna raise your cholesterol. You see these individual headlines that journalists grab, and it's just not right. It's not how the world works. It is natural. God created our bodies and created it as one system to live with the natural world, and all of that works together. And so if you take all the doctors and scientists in the whole world and all of their knowledge, and you brought it all together, we still wouldn't have scratched the surface on how this all works together. So the advantage of being an actuary is that I can at least synthesize a whole different bunch of different kinds of data, whether it's clinical trial data and scientific kind of data with my faith. We might get into that a little bit later, but all these different understandings and modalities, and even in the medical profession, it's very siloed. So you have people that are, cancer experts, oncologists, and you have the neurologists, and you have all, the gastroenterologists, and they're not talking to each other. And if you get diagnosed with something, you might have 3 different doctors. Well, that's not how the body works. It's all works together. And so I think the advantage of being an actuary is being able to synthesize lots of different kinds of information, not even data, but lots of different kinds of information and experiences. And then being able to, the other advantage we have is to then simplify it for people. So don't think my book is like really complicated. There's a lot of scientific references, but I put it completely in layman's language. I've got some cute illustrations and cartoons.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, I'm kind of wild too.
Live wild. Here we go.
Yeah.
I love that. So the tie-in there is super cool, and I think that speaks to a couple things here. Like, I always joke when I'm talking with my friends or family about, whether we're people, I'm the health guy in the area, right? So, you go to Thanksgiving dinner, and inevitably somebody's going to ask you about a nutrition question, or
Yep.
like workout routines or sleep.
Yep.
Like, it's just the way my life has been the last probably 10 years. And I'm fine with that. Like, I love it. I embrace it, right? But I feel like more often than not, I'm talking about, like, hey, take a walk outside and get some sunshine. And like, what I always make the joke, it's like woo-woo stuff. But like for you, with the data synthesizing you mentioned, is like, yeah, like go outside and get some sunlight and breathe some fresh air, and do some forest bathing. But guess what? There's data and science to back
right.
up that works, right?
Absolutely.
Like, it's not just like us, being like, tree huggers or anything
Well,
like
yeah.
that, right? It's like, that's real. So I think that's super cool to
Yeah.
blend that profession and the knowledge in there. And
Yeah.
that's what people are looking for. You said something about medicine being siloed. And it's funny, like, what the first thing that comes to mind for me is why we have so many patients, to validate this for you, so many patients that come to us, and one of the things that they are looking for in us is a healthcare approach with a team, right? Where you have your physician, you have your health coach, we're communicating, we're working together,
Yeah.
and we want to and be able to communicate with other specialists versus the opposite, which is the general experience, where it's like,
Right.
okay, hey, like, yeah, we have, some things going on with your heart health, and you've met with a cardiologist, but let's all talk about this. What can we do together
Exactly.
versus like, you do that, you do that,
Yeah.
you do that. Like,
Yeah.
and I always try to like frame for people that, well, one of the goals that we want to try to be for a lot of people is sort of like a quarterback for them, where it's like, let's tie everything together,
Yes.
right? Let's all bring the whole team together. We got everybody working, and like you said, bring everything to one piece. And so that's super, super cool. I love that.
And it's fantastic.
All right. So human, what do we call it? Human,
Flourishing.
yes,
Yeah,
human
it's
flourishing.
something.
There we go. I want to talk about that because I love the term. I always like struggle in our space right now. I think we're in a cool time where there's so many like neat health stuff, and a lot of things like us popping up, and people like you out there speaking the good word. And it's like, I never know like what to describe what we're all going for. But human flourishing resonates with me.
Yeah.
Tell me about it.
Yeah, I love it. Well, like I said, it's just that when you talk about health, I just don't think health captures everything, and even wellness, I don't think necessarily captures everything. And I'm in the corporate world, and we talk about corporate wellness and corporate well-being, and yeah, it's pretty good well-being, and in the corporate world, and what employers are trying to do for their employees. That fourth dimension, though, that I refer to spiritual, which I feel is really important, you don't get that in the corporate world because that's sort of a no-no. And so their fourth dimension is something like financial well-being. And so they'll have webinars to teach you how to budget with, I mean, yes, if you have financial problems, you're going to be stressed, and that's going to impact your body. But, some of the healthiest people in the world are the poorest. I talk in my book, I touch on the research in the blue zones. If anybody has read that book, or there was a Netflix show recently about the blue zones, and the blue zones are the places in the world where people are living the longest. They've got the highest percentage of centenarians, people that live to over 100. Right. And these places are like in the middle of nowhere. They're on islands and mountaintops in Greece, in Costa Rica, the island of Okinawa in Japan. And these people are very, very poor, but they grow their own food. They're doing a lot of manual labor. They have very tight social connections, and this is how they live. And so I personally, so that I kind of, in the corporate world, I talk about, I don't agree that financial needs to be an element of wellness or well-being or flourishing. So that's why I've changed it. And so I didn't come up with the term. Other people are using the term, but I've sort of defined it as these four particular buckets: physical, mental, social, and spiritual.
Love it. So let's unpack through those. And I love the talk about the blue zones. It's funny. One of the things that resonated really strong with me about the blue zones that I have talked about with a lot of our patients more and coached a lot more, and even try to like think about more in my own personal life, is how valuable human connection is in those
Yeah.
blue zones.
Yeah.
And that is so undervalued oftentimes in health. And we'll get to that
Yeah.
in the social side of things. But
Okay.
that was something that just like really rang true for me. So
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
have biological physical health. I want to start
Okay.
there. That's the
Okay.
one I think people, when they think of health and
Right.
wellness or human flourishing, which is what we're
Right.
talking about here, they
Right.
go to the physical thing. I got to exercise. I got to,
Yeah.
great. Like,
Yeah.
tell me, like, for biological physical health, you talk a lot about metabolic health.
Yeah.
What role does metabolic health
Yeah.
play in overall human flourishing? And
Yeah.
how do you approach optimizing metabolic health?
Yeah, I mean, your metabolic health is absolutely key. I mean, people tend to use the analogy of metabolism like the engine of a car. And that really, it doesn't get to what we're really talking about here. It's so much more complex than that. And so your metabolism, there's sort of two key parts, right? So really it's converting food into energy at its simplest level. But really it's much more complex. So down at the cellular level, you've got your mitochondria are in the cells, and they're taking the glucose and they're converting it to ATP, adenosine triphosphate, right? And that is the unit of energy in the human body that every single cell needs. Every single cell, all your different kinds of cells that have different functions that they're doing, they all need ATP, and that comes from your mitochondria. But then how does the mitochondria get at the glucose? Well, that you need the hormone insulin, which is excreted by your pancreas, and that is helping the glucose get inside the cells. But if your mitochondria are struggling through all sorts of lifestyle issues, you're not getting enough sleep, you've got toxins and your stress, all of this, that can cause mitochondrial dysfunction. That glucose is not getting into the cells, and so it's staying in your blood. Your blood doesn't want high blood sugar. That's very bad for your arteries, cause cardiovascular diseases, all sorts of other problems. And so your pancreas keeps churning out insulin to really try and force that glucose into the cells, and so that's you becoming insulin resistant. And so that's just a little bit, and it's obviously more complicated than that, but
Oh,
just
yeah.
to simplify it a little bit, that's kind of what's going on. But it gives you a sense that if your metabolism is struggling, it's not about, you might be a little overweight, or maybe you run out of energy and you have high lows of energy. So many different symptoms that you might have are actually related to your metabolism. Things like brain fog can be down to your metabolism, things like gastrointestinal issues, things like chronic pain, because if your mitochondria is struggling and you're not getting energy to the cells, all those different aspects are going to be faltering. So it is really critical. So in terms of, I think you said, how do we optimize it?
Yeah.
So I actually wrote an article last week. So I write kind of weekly, and I test out products that are out there in the market. I have no ties to these companies, but I'm trying to help my clients. And so the Signos app, so it's you wear a continuous glucose monitor. There's lots of other companies that do this. You
Mhm.
wear a continuous glucose monitor. They are not only for diabetics anymore. They were invented for diabetics.
We
In
prescribe them all the time to
Yeah,
your average
absolutely.
folk.
They're phenomenal, but you wear it temporarily. So,
Totally.
me and my husband, we were just wearing it for a month. Sorry, we had it for a month. and it monitors what is going on, but also the app is monitoring what exactly you're eating, how much you're drinking, how much you're exercising, and the timing of all of that. And so it just gradually, the app like this guy walks you through a program, so it slowly changes your behavior. And even it's a few months since I stopped doing it, I change how I eat. So even something like a food order. So, if you're going to have something that's kind of high carby, kind of maybe some fries, maybe for whatever reason you feel like having some fries that day, have them at the end of the meal. Or if you're having a dessert that's got a sort of high glycemic index, I'm a foodie. I love food. But if it's
Me too.
whole natural food, then it's all really good. And I don't put really sugar in. I might use coconut oil that's kind of sweet. But if you're having something for whatever reason that's kind of a high glycemic index, kind of leave it to the end of the meal. Make sure you got plenty of protein and good fats before that, and that will help you metabolize better. Or go for a walk after eating, or do some push-ups, or run up and down the stairs a couple of times. So these kinds of habits you can get into just to help improve your metabolism. Intermittent fasting is phenomenal. I'm sure you guys talk about that a lot. I do that. It's just natural for me. I eat between sort of 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. is kind of my sort of baseline. If I'm traveling or I'm out with friends or whatever, that will change. But that's kind of my baseline, just to really fast for a good 14 to 16 hours. So yeah, metabolism, metabolic health, absolutely critical.
Yeah. So what we're hearing is metabolic health largely driven by what we put on the end of our fork. There are things that we can do to monitor that. We use CGMs a lot. You mentioned that's a great tool for people to just get a picture of how they're handling foods. And we see some general trends in a lot of people, and then there's variability in people that they can find in that too, where they can figure out the best strategies that work for them. And then you mentioned a piece of metabolic health that should go right along hand in hand with it is exercise,
Mhm.
as a component there, which we'll get to in another one of the points here. But I think foundationally starting with that metabolic health is a great place for people to start. From there, you talk about the immune system as a part of the physical health.
Yeah.
How do you
So
view the connection between the immune system and just our overall human flourishing?
yeah, I think because again, with the complexity of the metabolism, the immune system is even more complex. And there's lots of pieces of the immune system. People know about antibodies and things like that, but the immune system, it actually consists of your tonsils, for example. They're kind of like the gateway to your whole immune system. They're full of lymphatic tissue. And if it's such a terrible for our young kids, they take out the tonsils if they get inflamed too much. Absolutely terrible, terrible medical practice, because your tonsils, they're fighting whatever the virus is that if it's coming through your nose or your mouth, and they'll try to fight it, but they also alert the other parts of the system. So you've got a thymus, an organ in your neck called the thymus, and that's training T cells. You've got a spleen that is helping to filter your blood of any pathogens. You've got your lymphatic system, which really doesn't have any doesn't have a muscle, so you really got to move to keep your lymphatic system going, which is filtering out pathogens. Your liver is obviously detoxifying you a lot. You've got your microbiome. Your microbiome actually talks to some of your white blood cells. There's actually science on this. The health of your metabolism can impact the level of your neutrophils, which are a type of white blood cell. So there's lots of different pieces of your immune system that all needs to work together. Even your bone marrow. So again, your white blood cells are created in your bone marrow. That's not just part of your skeleton to hold your body up. So to keep your immune system working well, you've got to keep all of those different pieces of it working well. So it's not just one thing. And if your immune system's working well, that's not just stopping you getting a cough or a cold or something like that, or getting over the flu really quickly. It's your immune system that monitors things like a tumor. So your cells are dividing all the time, and if something goes wrong and a tumor starts growing, it's your immune system that helps identify that and then clean out those cells that are mutant cells initially. Yeah,
Feel like we could do a whole episode on
I
just the
know,
immune
I know.
system,
I
especially
don't get too far onto
no,
that.
you're good, especially this time of year. But
Yeah.
let's talk about so just keeping our immune system healthy. What do you think so for our listeners out there, like practical
Mm.
steps that people can do on a daily basis in their lives that can boost their immune system and just make it a little stronger and protect?
Yeah, yeah. Well, you said go outside. I think it's one of my principles to go outside every day. If it's cold, bundle up. But outside, there's a whole science around the open air factor. So even if you've actually literally got a cold, a lot of people will just stay inside and bundle up. No, get outside. And it's not just the sun that's helping you create vitamin D in your skin. And in the winter, especially in some places you might be living, it's kind of hard to make vitamin D. So take a supplement of vitamin D, super important for your immune system. But get outside. There's more to it. There's ozone in the air. They've done science even at night that there is some secret source that is in outside air that is just germicidal. And just if you're suffering with something, it's just going to help you. And then just seeing nature and some green spaces is going to reduce your stress, which is very impactful on your immune system. So get outside, I think, will be number one. Obviously, eat great and whole food so that you're not nutrient deficient. So vitamin D, super important. Vitamin C, really, really important. I mean, there's so much science around. Did you know that vitamin C can cure Ebola or Zika or some of these viruses that people are scared of? So vitamin C is actually an antioxidant. We sort of downgrade it a little bit. Oh, it's just vitamin C. I'll eat an orange. Vitamin C is absolutely critical in the body. It helps the structural integrity of your blood vessels, for example. So that's why with some of these viruses, they call them hemorrhagic fevers. You start to bleed, and that's not just because of that virus. It's because that when you have a virus, you're using up vitamin C and antioxidant much faster. So to fight a virus, you need to be taking in more vitamin C. So I recommend throughout definitely the winter months, be taking extra vitamin C every day. So vitamin D, vitamin C, moving the body. Moving the body helps strengthen your microbiome, which is also going to be it's part of your immune system. And it's fascinating. There's a bi-directional relationship between your microbiome, so the good bacteria, and how much you exercise. So when you exercise, it encourages your good bacteria to create short chain fatty acids, which are good for your brain, they're good for your metabolism, and they're great for your immune system. But then when you start doing that, actually, they've done the science on this, your microbiome, those good bacteria, actually excrete something that makes you want to exercise more. It's so cool. So that's why it's really hard to start an exercise program. But once you're going, you're kind of addicted to it. It's like you don't feel well until you go for a run that day or go for a walk. So it's really cool how it all works together. And then sleep, lots of really getting great sleep. Don't discount how important sleep is. We could have a whole discussion on that.
Totally.
Uh, and then stress, of course. So just mitigate your stress. And we'll get into that a little bit later because I think your social connections and some of that spiritual practices can really help mitigate stress. So we'll come back.
Yeah, I love it, and it's a good message this time of year to remind people, when the different germs are floating around or things happen here and there, but even just throughout life, consistently working on those things. The microbiome you mentioned with the exercise piece, yeah, we see that time and time again, where people improve their gut health when they start many healthy habits, definitely including exercise, and that whole realm more that gets uncovered with the microbiome. It's just like you said, like things are just so interconnected. It's
Yeah.
so fascinating to see how these natural health practices impact so many systems in the body, including the microbiome, which seems to impact like literally everything. Every time I'm like reading a new article or a new study, it's like, oh, there's the microbiome again, doing something cool for us. So that's awesome. We're going to get into my personal favorite topic here, which is musculoskeletal integrity.
Yeah.
And the importance of that. And you sort of linked the last two things we talked about deal a lot with this same one, as they're all interconnected. Why do you think that this is often overlooked? Like muscular skeletal health, sorry.
MSK.
Yeah, it's often overlooked. Like I
Yeah.
think people know they should exercise, but we're talking about like making your muscle tissue healthy.
Yeah.
And I think that gets overlooked oftentimes.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is? And what are some key practices to maintaining this musculoskeletal integrity?
Yeah, I think it gets overlooked because it's just like, oh, musculoskeletal health. So exercising is just to lose weight or just to look pretty and have better muscles and things. And I think people don't realize how important it is to overall health. So even if you just think about your heart and cardiovascular health, well, your heart is a muscle, and you've got to exercise it to keep it strong. I think I mentioned that in terms of the immune system, you've got a lymphatic system. Well, the lymphatic system doesn't have a muscle, and it only works if you're moving. Okay, so you're only moving the lymph around your body if you're literally moving. And so to filter the toxins and the pathogens, and the lymph is so important for that, you need to be moving to do that. So that's super important. And then for bone strength, You need to be doing some weight bearing exercises are really important as well. So and we talked about the microbiome. So it's not that it's just to lose weight or to use up more calories or to look pretty. It's actually really critical for aspects of your health. So for me, I would always say start with walking. Always start with walking, just moving. So, I think you're on a standing desk now. I have a standing desk, even a treadmill desk. So for those of us that are tied to our desks so many hours a day, you've got to get a bit creative with how to move. But even just parking far away from where you're going and you have to walk across the parking lot. I go for a walk every afternoon just round the block in my neighborhood. So walking, I think, is absolutely critical, and it's sort of number one. But beyond that, you've really got to do something that you enjoy. And so I don't think I would get prescriptive. I'd have to get to know the person. I know that's what you do as a coach. And so you got to get to know the person and kind of try out different things. So for me, I find the gym really boring and just pumping iron. I find it really boring. So I actually found my way to kickboxing last year. And you're never too old to
Nice.
start any kind of new exercise, by the way.
Absolutely.
So I started kickboxing, and I go to it's called 9 Round. Shameless plug there, but it's like circuit training for kickboxing. So you're learning how to kickbox, which I'd never done anything like that in my life before. And your legs are moving, but there's also some of the rounds, so it's 9 rounds and like 3 minutes on each round, and it's very quick for me. I'm super busy. I show up and I'm out of there in 30 minutes, but it's intense for those 30 minutes. And you're doing some weight bearing, some weights, and then you got your gloves on. You got different shaped bags and things, and your legs are moving. And the last one is always on the floor with sort of core exercises. So that really worked for me, and I really enjoy it. And the exercises change every single day. So that really worked for me. But I also took up pickleball. I'm a tennis player, but I actually found in my old age, my back couldn't handle it and my shoulder couldn't handle playing tennis as rigorously as I love to. So I actually gave in and took up pickleball, and now I absolutely love it. And it's very social. So that sort of works for me. But whatever works for you, I mean, even if it's just gardening, some people like yoga, whatever, just try different things. Go to your local YMCA if you can't find stuff to do. Hiking clubs. I do a lot of hiking with my husband. So really, that's the important thing. I would say walking for everybody. Just make sure you're walking further, and then find what's going to work for you.
Yeah, I love that you started with walking. That's something that we talk about a lot with people, and it's sort of like making a comeback. I feel like
Mhm.
the old wearable, the Fitbit, was like the original like wearable, was like walk 10,000 steps, and then people were like, I don't know, that seems like it's not enough, and like it's pretty clear with past research studies, current research studies that you increase your step count per day and you move more, like good things are going to happen to you, and you're going to stave off more bad things. Like it's very, very obvious. And it's a great place for people to start. And it's a place where a lot of things go overlooked. I can't tell you how many times we'll be chatting with people and trying to help them through their exercise routines or get started, and they have different goals around their health. And they might go do their kind of dedicated, 30 to 60 minutes of exercise at a class or a gym. And they're maybe still struggling in some areas of metabolic health or mood or even weight loss, body fat loss. And I'm like, hey, glance down at your Apple Watch there. Like, how many steps you got today? It's 12:30 in the afternoon. 1,500. I'm like, 1,500. Like, get to
Yeah.
stepping, and like I think in our world today, so many people get stationary because of the jobs that we have. Uh, I'm one of those people. I work for in a healthcare industry, and here I am standing at my desk. But optimizing your workstation, like you said, such a great practice. People can set up, a treadmill to walk on to get those steps in when they're working, or taking breaks, like you said. We talk about exercise snacking a lot. It's like little bits of
Oh,
exercise
yeah.
throughout the day,
I love that. Yeah.
10 push-ups every hour for your
Yeah.
8-hour workday, whatever it is,
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
I love that. And I think, I love that you made, as you described this practice of exercise, uh, left it at a low barrier for entry, because I think a lot of people are hesitant to exercise because
Yeah.
we, the fitness industry, and I say we because I've been
Mhm.
guilty of this in the past, we make it seem like it has to be a big production.
Yeah. Yeah.
It needs to be something you like, and it needs
Right.
to be movement.
Yeah. Exactly.
And there's certain principles like, yeah, you got to get some load on your muscles and you got to do certain things, but
Yeah.
how that looks in practice, whether it's pickleball, whether it's
Yeah.
yoga,
Yeah.
it's just, you got to enjoy it. So I
Yeah.
appreciate you making it accessible for people, because it needs to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
The last piece I have under physical health that I wanted to talk about is nutrient and molecular balance.
Yeah.
So just nutrients in general, and balancing those through our diet,
Yeah.
But then even where maybe there's some room for dedicated supplementation to fill in gaps, you mentioned vitamin D, vitamin C,
Yeah.
some areas where some basic needs can be met. But how critical is just the nutrition piece of this physical health? And how do you balance that with all the others?
Yeah, I think for me, nutrition is number one. And I would include in that what you're eating on the end of your fork and on your plate, plus supplementation. And I'm not saying that you can't possibly optimize your health without any supplementation. Maybe if you live on an organic farm on a Greek island. Uh,
That would
but,
be great.
but we are so depleted because in our modern world and our modern conveniences, we're taking in so many toxins that to keep our bodies optimal, we just can't get at it on the end of our forks. Even if we are eating entirely organic food, it's just not got all the nutrients that we need, especially if you're coming to your health journey midlife. And so you've already done some damage to your body, and now you're trying to fix it. There's such a deficiency already built up that you've really got to supplement. So for me, absolutely, I prefer you to get it from whole food. So that's definitely number one. But for me, supplementation is a great place to start because you can start feeling better really quickly with a high quality nutrient. So to me, it's absolutely huge. And there's some basics that I think for everybody, like a really high quality multivitamin. Don't just go to Costco or Walmart and pick up something from the shelf. That's not going to literally do anything for you because it's got to be the right balance. It's got to be absorbable in your body. You don't want synthetic vitamins because if they're made in a lab, that they can actually do more damage to you than benefit you. So it's got to be a high quality from a high quality brand that's been tested. So multivitamin very important. Usually extra vitamin D. Unless you're living in the sun and you're a farmer and you're out there every day, just about everybody needs vitamin D supplementation. And you can take a blood test and kind of see your levels. But that's very important. As I said, vitamin C also very important, but also the B vitamins very important. If you're dealing with any kind of mental health issue, which we'll get into next, B vitamins absolutely super important. But multivitamin with all the right combination in because they kind of all work together, and then a probiotic. I would also say just about everybody needs. And there's different schools of thought, and again, it needs to be a really high quality one. There's a lot of junk out there, but a high quality probiotic or fermented foods. If you've got the time and energy to make your own fermented foods, then sometimes you might not need probiotics. But if you're busy and you don't have time to do all of that, like me, I tend to recommend a high quality probiotic just to help your microbiome. You need to be eating plenty of fiber to feed them as well. But that's usually a good place to start, and then just get into your individual needs, figuring out what your symptoms are and what's going to help you.
Love that. Yeah, nutrition is certainly number one. It's, I think, the thing we probably talk about most with our patients. In general, this wherever they come to us at, there's still usually something in the nutrition to have a conversation about, and it impacts everything, like you said. So it's super foundational. And as we transition here, psychological emotional health. It's just, I mean, it's obviously a huge piece to everything. I think it's very much at the forefront of people these days. People are just struggling. I feel like I see it a lot. And, you know, we've all gone through it ourselves at times. And so what do you like, where do you see the importance of this fitting into the whole puzzle? Like, um, as far as just one's psychological and emotional health, what are the key like action items for people to take a look at here and practical steps they can input in their life in some of these ways to improve that aspect of their health?
Yeah, I think people are they have like what might be termed a mental health issue or an emotional issue. Maybe they're depressed, maybe they're very anxious. Even the more serious ones, like you've got a label, schizophrenia or bipolar, and people kind of put that in a category. Well, that's mental health. It's some sort of moral failing or something like that, and you know they'll get some sort of counseling and maybe there's medication involved. And I think what people are missing is the connection of your brain health to your overall body health. And so any kind of mental health issue, there's a root cause. And so you need to find out what is that root cause. It could be nutrient deficiencies. I mentioned the B vitamins. A deficiency in B vitamins is probably going to lead to depression. And by the way, a lot of pharmaceuticals cause nutrient deficiencies. And so if you've been on something for a while, and it might be because you've had a mental health issue, it's actually going to contribute to those problems. Other pharmaceuticals can cause a depletion in acetylcholine. They're called an anti-cholinergic substance, and it's reducing the neurotransmitters in your brain and causing all of these kinds of problems. So when your brain's not working well, the symptoms, it doesn't have pain receptors in your brain. So the symptoms tend to be what we might call emotional or behavioral kind of issues. And you might just feel more overwhelmed. Now, it's not to say that your life isn't busy and overwhelming, but the way you can handle it, your resilience, really depends on the health of your body. So I would say figure out what might the root cause be. So nutrient deficiencies we talked about, but it might be something like a head injury. So, and I'm not talking about, playing football or being in a car accident. I mean, certainly you might have been in a car accident 4 years ago and just kind of forgotten about it and not realized the damage that had been done. But you could be falling out of bed, slipping in the shower. There's other ways you could have unknowingly got a concussion, and it's really contributing to some problems that are going on with your brain. So you can get some brain imaging, very safe, and can look at what's going on in your brain. So injuries, certainly. Other kinds of physical things that are going on. We talked about metabolic health. If you've got poor blood sugar management, it's affecting your brain and your emotions. Everybody's talked about hangry. So you might have said your spouse is hangry. Oh, you skip lunch, go eat something,
Guilty. I'm a
Absolutely.
hangry.
Yeah, so there's also and other conditions too. So autoimmune conditions, and again, it might be the pharmaceuticals you're on, or it might be something going on in your body, your immune system, whatever it happens to be, can cause what we might cause emotional health. Even something like schizophrenia, which is everybody's like, whoa, that's a lifelong thing. It needs medication. Not necessarily. If you go back to the 1950s, when there was something called pellagra, which is known you can actually die from it. It's a massive deficiency in niacin, which is vitamin B3. They actually knew in the 1950s that the only reason they would distinguish between schizophrenia and a pellagra, sort of neuro version of pellagra, was whether or not you responded to niacin therapy, vitamin B3 therapy. And what they found now, the science has shown that if you've been deficient in niacin for a long time, years and years and years, then your requirement is massive. And so people that are even hospitalized with schizophrenia, they get them on massive doses of niacin, sort of 20,000, 30,000 milligrams a day or even more, and they become entirely normal. So your brain health is completely connected to all the other aspects of your bodily health.
Totally. And we see it a lot. I think people are starting to understand that those systems are connected. I know just even from a basic standpoint, I think we all feel, those of us that are consistently physically active, and you have periods of time where a couple days and maybe you're not as active and you're feeling just kind of like randomly down for some reason. And then you
Right.
get out there and you work out and you're like,
Yep.
okay, I feel good again. Maybe that was what I needed,
Exactly.
right? Like
Exactly.
that system is very interconnected with the physical body. And I love the relationship you explained there. And I think if people can take home a message here on that is, uh, when you're struggling with mental health or struggling with emotional health, seeking the correct support and investigating the root cause is a big thing, because it can be a little bit different for everybody. But figuring out what is that true root issue and working with people around you to surround yourself to find the steps, and then making sure all these foundational things that you've talked about already are solidified. We're getting outside. We're eating the nutrient dense foods that we need. We're moving our bodies to make sure those things are interconnected the way you talk about. And along those same lines, I think social health plays right into this.
Yep.
With the pandemic, people were increasingly isolated, and many still feel that way. Many experience some things that have kind of set them back.
Mm.
So in your experience, like, how do social connections influence our overall health and tie right into the emotional health aspect of it too?
Yeah. And there's a lot of science about this, but just as we were created to interact with the natural world and plants, and that's why we need to eat a lot of plants, and the microbiome helps us, we were created to interact with other humans. even exchanging when we're breathing and we're hugging other humans, we're improving our microbiome. That's why it was such terrible advice to stay inside and isolate during the pandemic, because actually that's reducing our immune system. Being outside and being, laughing with friends and in person, not on screens, but in person, does something in our bodies, and we can't quite nail down exactly what's going on, but the science shows it's happening, that we are boosting our immune system by those social connections. I like to tell a story, and I talk about it in my book, of this little town of Roseto that was originally in Italy in the 1800s. It was like a little town on the side of a mountain, and there was a slate quarry there, and everybody worked in the slate quarry, but the slate quarry wasn't producing any slate anymore, and they wanted to find a better world. So in the late 1800s, a bunch of them set sail for the US and the New World, and they settled in Pennsylvania, and they created a new little town in Pennsylvania called Roseto, all these Italians. And it was noticed that they had far lower levels of heart disease and ill health than all the towns around them. So now we're getting into the 1900s. And a doctor and a journalist wanted to investigate why that was. So they go to this little town and they're trying to figure out, well, what are they eating? Maybe it's all that olive oil or something, that they're eating Italian food. Or maybe, what is it? Maybe because they're working in manual labor, they found another kind of a quarry to work in Pennsylvania. And actually they found it was none of that. The food, they'd actually started eating some American food and pizzas and American style pizzas. And they had sedentary jobs. They weren't all working in the quarry anymore. And they were trying to figure out, and they're all smoking now as well. So they're like, well, how are they so healthy? What is it going on? And they spent time living in this village for a week. And there's a beautiful passage, and I replicate it in my book, that explains just looking around the village. They all live and do their lives together. So they have multi-generational homes where the grandparents are living with their kids and the grandkids. They meet every day in the village square. They built a new church, and every day they meet in the village square and share what happened that day, have a glass of wine together, and just interact and socialize. And when they're walking down the street, everybody's saying hi to each other. It's those social connections. And so they had literally shown that those tight social bonds had actually improved cardiovascular health without some of those other factors, those lifestyle factors that we've been talking about. So really, really fascinating story.
Every time I read any literature or hear anybody speak about how important social connection is, and then seeing like science and data consistently to back that up for people, it was shocking at first, but I hear it so often that as I work with people in our practice and our other health coaches and physicians, our antennas are up about it. We're making sure that people are having, it's one of the questions on our intake forms. It asks about social connections for people.
Yep.
And how do you feel kind of on a scale 1 to 10, like that
Yep.
your social connections are, because of those exact reasons. I've told this story to other people before, but I like to use wearable data to track things because I'm a nerd, and it's cool. And it's not obsessive for me, and it doesn't have it's never created negativity as it can do for some people, for sure. And it's not for everybody, but HRV is one of the metrics I like to track, heart rate variability,
Oh, yeah.
and just stress resilience from there. And I always get my best scores on vacation.
Imagine.
Always. Like, some of my best scores come in on vacation. And I'm usually like, maybe I'm sleeping a little more because we can sleep in or things like that, but definitely not eating the way I normally do. And maybe, an alcoholic beverage here or there. But it doesn't seem to matter. Like, those scores are always, and it reminds me how important those connections are when you're with people that you care about around them
Yeah.
consistently all day.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
it's just so valuable. And
Yeah.
I love seeing that show up in my own data.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just this kind of validating.
Yeah, and but not just your family. I mean, I would say, yes, maybe you have a big family and you've got kids and you can get off on vacation, but it needs to be beyond your family and the people that know
Mhm.
you really well. It is that, even in the grocery store, smiling at somebody in the grocery store, and then and friends, and everybody needs friends. And whether you're a single person or a married person with couple friends, it's beyond your own family as well.
I love that. I love that. It's great practical advice. This last one is one that you and I talked a little bit about earlier, as I think it gets overlooked. In not and I think some of it can be maybe people just haven't adopted a practice or they're unsure of what to do here, but it's spiritual health. And I remember, I didn't tell you this before, but I was a high school teacher for a little bit.
Okay.
and I taught health and physical education. And in
Oh,
our health class, we actually talked about these 4 domains of wellness
okay.
at the
Okay.
beginning of the class, and
Okay.
we touched on them. And I remember teaching about spiritual health, and the first time I kind of learned about that in our curriculum, I was like, I never realized how that the key role it plays in wellness. And so for you, how do you view spiritual health for the general person in terms of like, what's a practical way if you're looking at these 4 things and people are going through this podcast today and they're
Yeah.
like, okay, physical health, doing pretty good. Maybe some tidbits there I can improve. Same thing with my mental health, social health, going to work on that. Spiritual health, feeling kind of empty there.
Yeah.
Where do people start practically,
Yeah.
and what kind of role does spiritual health play in this overall picture, tying it all together?
Yeah. I think at the foundational level, it's about having a purpose in life, right? So even if you've got a job and like you go and maybe it's a job that you love, maybe you're serving people and you're helping people in that job. Maybe you have that job and it's to provide for your family and maybe that's your purpose. But it's a little bit beyond that. I think it's believing in something bigger than yourself. I think today's world, especially culturally, encourage us to think of ourselves as an individual. But and just it's all about me and and getting what I want and being who I am and I'm different to you and that's certainly important. You are an individual, but it's more about becoming a person. And when you're a person, you have ties to other people. That's what makes you who you are, not just what's inside this shell. It's your ties to other people and your own community and your own network. And I think that's what makes you a whole person is those kinds of ties. And so your purpose then is beyond yourself. And so, it might be helping those other people or being, like you say, in your world, you're the health guy. And if anybody has a health question, they're going to come to you in your circles. And I'm similar in mine. But beyond that sort of purpose, and it depends who I'm talking to, it's getting at there's something bigger than you and there's something up there. And for me, I did all that research and I figured out that there actually is a God. I was raised Jewish and we don't really think about that in the Jewish religion. It's all very cultural and the community is huge. Community is very tight, but everything is kind of cultural and we don't really think much beyond ourselves and our community. And so I did the research. It took me like 8 years. I'd started going to a church. My kid's dad had taken me to church, and so I started learning and listening, and it was like 8 years before I actually concluded. But there's tons of science, all different realms of science, and the human body for me, it's the human body. If you just have an inkling of how this amazing human body works and how it works with the natural world, why natural therapies are so efficacious, it's because it was all created to work together, and that's just one work stream. There's lots of other things and science levels, areas of science you could look at. So for me, I got completely convinced, and it's just reality. It's not woo woo. It's just fact, like physics, like, E equals MC squared. It is just a fact. We were created by this higher being that we call God, all created to be together. And once you know that, and you know that he gave us an instruction manual, which we call the Bible, and it's not this old-fashioned text. It's actually completely relevant. If you actually read it, and most people that pass it off, they've never actually read it. If you actually read it and start to understand it and see the supernatural nature, how it was written by like 40 different people, but all completely fits together perfectly, and how anything you're going through, you can find something in there that's going to help you. So this instruction manual, it gives you such a sense of peace. Because when you're struggling with an issue, how do I address this? How do I address that? It's got the information and there's going to be no future science that's going to, supersede what is written in there. It's perfect. And even, just one tidbit that so parts of the Bible, the Old Testament were written, 2000 more years ago, many thousands of years ago, before we knew that the earth was round, before Galileo and everything. It refers to the earth being round in the Bible. Just give you one little tidbit. So there's tons of evidence if you actually study it. And then you have that piece that, oh, this is correct. So there's lots of clinical trials and science that will say, eggs are good, eggs are bad, all of that. And that changes. This never changes. And so it gives you such a sense of peace when you understand. And then your purpose becomes, well, what does God want from me? And how am I going to glorify God? And just reading those instruction manuals, so prioritizing others and yourself and loving other people and serving, all those things. If you do all of those things, and even God's design for marriage and stuff like that, if you just follow that, it just gives you this peace and things work out and it helps your physical health as well. Part of that is community. I mean, the instructions are for community and church. And so, for listeners, maybe you're isolated. So social and spiritual sometimes go together. And if you're not in some sort of religious community, I would encourage you to check it out. You might be skeptical. I was extremely skeptical. It might take you 8 years. I hope not. But do your research and go there. And even if you only go there for the community aspects to start with, start there and then kind of see where that goes. But I think overall that sense of that there's something bigger than ourselves just has been scientifically shown to just improve our health. But then you can get at all the different reasons why that is.
The great message to tie all those four together. And I like ending with that one because of the way you mentioned purpose and how people searching for purpose is a big foundational piece to living and human flourishing.
Mm.
And I appreciate how the message reigns through so that our listeners have tidbits to grab onto in each category to really take a look and create this whole being of wellness. And in closing here, as I sort of try to land the plane, I want to summarize a little bit and I want to pull something out of your book as well. And so I think for people listening at home, in summary, we've talked about these 4 dimensions of wellness. We've got the physical, we've got psychological and mental, emotional, social, and spiritual. And if you're listening and you're hearing improvements where you want to make in each of these areas, Emma's done a great job providing some opportunities there and things to think about. But it can seem overwhelming too when you get a lot of this information. Even reading your book, which is fantastic, and you say this at the end, which is why I pulled it out. But there's a lot of things here. But this is a quote directly from your book: "Is the best journey for you is always going to be the one that suits your personality and lifestyle." And I think when people are thinking about the advice and the things we talked through today, which was a lot, is that truly this is your journey and figuring out where you personally want to begin and start with these things is the real key here. And I think the way that you explained through each of these is in a way that shows how interconnected everything is. And so I appreciate you sharing and taking the time with us. And I think we could spend an entire hour or hours talking about each of these. We truly could. And I really want to.
Yeah.
I'm like, but it's incredible. So thank you so much for being here with me today. And I know we'll certainly do this again sometime and stay connected and unpack some more of these things. The one last thing that I did want to read to folks, and again, right from your book, is 10 Principles for Being a Healthy Human. This is a great way to close. And I'm just going to read this for the audience to kind of stew on and listen through, but it covers a lot of the things we talked about. And so 10 principles for being a healthy human. Number 1, nourishment is a priority. Think about every mouthful. Number 2, move your body every day. Number 3, reduce toxic exposures. And if it didn't exist 100 years ago, be wary. Number 4, commit to uncompromising sleep. Number 5, prioritize and optimize your relationships. Number 6, believe in a power bigger than yourself. Find his purpose in your life. Number 7, avoid medications and embrace supplements and natural remedies that work with your body. Number 8, the sun is your life force. Get outside in nature every day. Number 9, water is magical. Drink more of it. Cheers to that. And number 10, use your critical thinking skills at all times. Only you and God know what your body needs. Beautifully written, Emma. Thank you so much for being here. Like I said, we're going to have to do this again because there's so much more I want to dive into. And I'm excited to finish the book and continue to build practice in my own life, and as well as sharing the gifts with our patients as well.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. For Emma, I'm Steve. You guys are listening to the Wild Health Podcast. We'll see you next time.
Thanks so much for listening to the Wild Health Podcast. If you want more daily health education, be sure to follow us on Instagram, which is filled with health optimization how-tos, grocery shopping lists, guided breathwork posts, myth debunking, and so much more. You can find us at Wild Health MD on Instagram.